The zombie genre is often dark, depressing, grim, gritty, sad, tense, and violent. Sometimes it's silly, sometimes it's not. In a world where everything smells of rotten flesh and bad decisions, there's rarely a silver lining. Yet this turn for the worse is exactly what Zom 100 uses to showcase the bright side of life. Despite what the genre implies, zombie stories are less about zombies and all about the survivors. But where most movies focus on the nerve-wracked cast facing the terror of being eaten alive, Zom 100 offers a life-affirming zombie story with its upbeat pistache of brightly colored blood to dispel the dark and gritty atmosphere. The only times it uses the monotone color palette is to establish a dreadful mood during Akira's tenure in the Black Company. Zom 100 questions the accepted norms that prevents us from living our best life. Free of office politics, tired traditions, and confining social hierarchies, our protagonist is able to focus on the things that make life worth living. That is, kindness, caring for families, and community. When the zombie apocalypse breaks out, chaos ensues and most people are either running around like a headless chicken or hoarding food and toiletries to survive. But Akira was already half dead with one foot in the grave as a working stiff. Where other people still cling on to the hope of living, Akira already comes to terms with the likelihood of becoming a zombie. But instead of immediately rolling over dead, he takes this chance as a free ticket to do everything he wished he could if he had the time or money. So he makes a bucket list before he kicks the proverbial bucket. Giving up on any hope of living a normal life ironically allows him to live a fuller life in the present. Removing restrictive expectations that exist to keep order and society safe certainly frees up your choices and possibilities. The idea of making a list before kicking the bucket may sound ridiculous when most people are doing their best to hold out on becoming zombie meat. I say most people because you can bet that not everyone will be focused on survival or making a bucket list. A zombie apocalypse removes all social repercussions because, everything is chaotic and falling apart. Some people will focus on survival and hoard supplies, and some will fall into depravity and riot, causing anarchy. It's every man for himself. And then there's Akira, who sees it as an opportunity to make the most out of it before he too begins to crave flesh and bones. On paper, it's a terrible idea. I mean, dude, why would you do that? Can't we just look for essential supplies instead of trying to bike our way through the apocalypse just to confess to our zombified office crush? Nope. We either do this or die trying. Akira every single time. But in practice, it's still a damn terrible idea. I'm not going to sugarcoat or justify it. For any sane person stuck in an apocalypse where they can die at any given time, survival is the top priority. That's pretty much the only sane decision, unless you have a death wish. But for Akira, it's simply not the case. He cares more about spending his limited time doing everything he can before he expires. So that's the title, Bucket List of the Dead. But there's more to it than just simply doing what he can before he bites the dust, or in this case, bites the flesh. I'd rather get eaten by zombies instead. This is Akira's catchphrase whenever he's about to do something crazy or something on his bucket list. And anyone can easily dismiss this bucket list as something silly or stupid. Maybe it's insane given the gravity of the situation they're in. But for the last 3 years, Akira has been trying to survive the exploitative Black Company where he was employed. Before everything went absolute nuts, he was already just trying to survive. Living and surviving are two completely different things. Just because he's alive doesn't mean he's living, and just because he's surviving doesn't mean he's alive. Surviving the apocalypse is what you'll normally see in most zombie media. For the protagonists, being able to live or being alive is basically the happy ending. In Akira's case, surviving isn't necessary. He's already past the survival part and he's just living in the moment. All those hours he spent as a working stiff numbed him to the point where he's completely forgot what it's like to live like a human. It took a world-ending apocalypse for Akira to realize that he's been living his life as a zombie all this time, and now there's an opportunity for him to leave that soul-crushing lifestyle behind, to take back his life and go all out. If he's going to be a zombie anyway, may as well enjoy the last remaining days of his life to the fullest, right? Yeah, that's one way to look at it, but not everyone subscribes to the same positive outlook he has during the zombie apocalypse. Throughout the series, we see how people react to the apocalypse. Akira and the gang are the rare exception who takes it positively, but it's not just them who sees it in an unconventional perspective. One group in particular is this bizarro bunch led by Kanata Higurashi, where each member has their own reason why they want to see the world burn. They seize the opportunity to take revenge on a society that rejected and shunned their existence. They want to make a mess out of it because it's payback for their misery. You can almost sympathize with their plight if it weren't for the fact that their responses were dog water at best. Not to dismiss their suffering, but these guys were already insufferable and outright awful before the apocalypse began. And now that it's here, they see it as an excuse to let their inner demons out. They found a common ground in ruining what's left of society because apparently it's fun. But at the same time, they're just there to stir up conflict and fuel drama. Because what good is a zombie story if there's nothing to fight over? But then again, society is crumbling, so who's to stop them from having their brand of fun? Higurashi sees the apocalypse as an opportunity to sow chaos. Just like Akira, he also has this bucket list that he and his group want to do, like blowing up the company that slighted them, or firing a real gun. But there's more to it than just doing what he thinks is the definition of fun. Kanata Higurashi is a byproduct of a society that stresses an intensive work culture. But instead of being exploited like Akira, he's a pessimistic NEET, not in education, employment, or training, who sees nothing of value in working for corporate firms because the pay is garbage and the prospects no different than staying in his room. Likewise, these companies also don't see the value in hiring him. So when the apocalypse happened, he saw it as a liberation from the clutches of a white-collar society. Finally, eternal summer break, he declares. Higurashi's obsession with eternal summer breaks stems from the fact that he is lonely and has fallen behind in terms of forming relationships. On the surface, one might say he's just jealous of Akira or anyone who's having fun. But deep inside, he just wants to hang out with everybody, except he's unable to express himself honestly. In the past, he was surrounded by people, but as he grew older he became shy, which led to his isolation. He couldn't communicate well, which in turn made him lonely. He tried to form some sort of connection with other people and even tried some forms of therapy, but in the end, it didn't work. It was during this time when he saw Akira's bright attitude and affable demeanor that he became envious of such happy-go-lucky people. It annoyed him seeing Akira living his best life when he couldn't have that. But it was a little too late when he realized that all he wanted was just, to play at the pool with his friends. Higurashi is a sad, sad boy. You can almost feel sorry for him, and it's a tricky situation because, if you think about it, for Higurashi, causing chaos and burning down society can be seen as a therapeutic method of releasing stress and anger. There's a reason why anger management sessions and anger rooms exist in the first place. All that pent-up anger and frustration is released when he does whatever he thinks will make him feel better, and that's where the problem starts. Higurashi and his group's methods are what separates them from Akira's group. Sure, they both share this goal of checking off their bucket lists, but the similarities end there. When you compare Higurashi to Akira, you'll see that there's a really big difference between their personalities. Akira used to live in a very toxic environment, paralyzed by fear and anxiety. That, coupled with peer pressure from his coworkers and the daily gaslighting and verbal abuse he received from his boss, turned Akira into something worse than a mindless, flesh-eating undead. Those symptoms became even worse when he reunited with his old boss, Kosugi, because these fears were reactivated once again, convincing Akira that the world is too dangerous, despite recently facing the dangers head-on and doing just fine. When Shizuka pulled him out of his funk, Akira was able to return to his true self. He even ends up rescuing his old boss from the zombies and saving most of the survivors in the process. It's surprising that Akira didn't bear any form of hatred or vengeance for someone who made his life a living hell. Most people will be like, screw this guy, and will probably even relish the moment of seeing someone's agony, especially if that someone wronged them in the past, just like one of Higurashi's members. Akira could have let the zombies eat his boss and we wouldn't even bat an eye. Hell, we'll probably even praise him for doing so and say that that awful team leader got his just desserts. But Akira took the high road and did what most people wouldn't do. Akira's presence inspires hope and optimism, whereas Higarashi's attitude spreads fear and hatred. Akira brings the best out of people, like when he saved his friend Kencho from giving up by encouraging him to take a leap of faith. He tells his friend to quit yapping and start jumping. In that moment when Kencho jumps, he becomes someone new, a positive change. The same can be said with Shizuka when time and time again they would meet and Akira's attitude ultimately rubbed off on her and changed her for the better. They each had some past unresolved trauma which heavily affected their personalities, and it took an apocalyptic scenario for them to deal with them, which is rather an extreme form of therapy. However, this event didn't make Akira and his gang worse. In fact, it changed them for the better. They didn't become worse like Higurashi and his group, but it's a matter of perspective really. Maybe it's unfair to compare Higurashi to Akira because unlike Akira, he didn't have anyone whom he could truly call a friend, like Kencho. He wasn't surrounded by people who loved him despite everything, but that doesn't mean he can be an asshat just because he wasn't loved. It's completely understandable if he wanted to change, and in his last moments, he probably realized he wanted to, but it was just a little bit too late for him. Akira is sort of a beacon of hope. He's not a hero or a zombie slayer or something that people can rely on to rescue them in a pinch, but he is a positive factor in an environment riddled with pessimism and cannibalism. Zom 100 is no High School of the Dead in terms of fan service and insane jiggle physics, or Kabaneri in terms of action and suspense. You can turn your brain off and enjoy it as any other show, but it's so much more than that and offers many life-affirming lessons that can be overlooked if you only view it as a mindless show with zombies and cute anime girls. They took the tried and tested zombie formula, even though the genre's popularity died 10 years ago, revived it, and threw the formula out the window to instead deliver an optimistic story about making the most out of a bleak situation. You don't need to be an overworked and underpaid exploited sweatshop worker to get something out of this. This anime eliminates all the suspense of surviving a zombie apocalypse because that's not really the point. The point is, how are you going to spend your vacation in a hellscape unironically less hostile than your previous work environment to become the best version of yourself? The zombies are just a minor inconvenience for Akira to vault over and overcome the rut he's in for the last 3 years of his life. It's a backdrop for him to actualize his potential and become his best self. He wants to do all the fun things life has to offer, especially now that the world's already in the brink of collapse. Akira is aware that he can die anytime soon, but he wants to die without regrets. Many zombie apocalypse scenarios simply portray optimism as desperately clinging to hope. So it's refreshing to see Akira's genuinely positive outlook when everything around him is grim. After the main characters are introduced, Zom 100 becomes a slice-of-life adventure anime, and the zombies no longer pose a serious threat to those with plot armor, unlike those poor flight attendants. But that's all there is to it. At the end of the day, Akira's adventure isn't about finding the cure or a safe house. It's still about checking something off his list, until they get bored and question its purpose. More on that if we ever get another season. Zom 100 is all about living in the moment, thriving, not simply surviving. That's why it's an adventure of a lifetime, a second chance at life. You can loosely categorize Zom 100 as an isekai-like anime, where a protagonist is transported into a different world from what they know. Technically, it's not an isekai, because isekai literally means another world, but in a sense a world plunged into a zombie landscape is just like another world. We all know it can't happen, but at the back of our heads we know that should it happen, we'll never become part of the undead hordes because we'll be the badass survivors holding the assault rifle. Just kidding. It's wish fulfillment for all the doomsday preppers, and they're gonna be drooling at the sight of zombie heads waiting to be popped. But for regular citizens like you and me, it's a literal nightmare. Half the world's societies crumble to dust as if some purple dude from outer space snapped his fingers. Now you have to fight for toilet paper and bread, You can't even drink clean water anymore without it smelling like piss and mud. So say you survived the initial outbreak. How do you even live in this second chance at life that you've been granted abruptly? Enjoy the little things. Yeah, that's right. Columbus and Tallahassee's rule number 32 for surviving Zombieland is appreciating the little things in life, even if it means breaking a lot of little things in the process. Maybe that's why Zom 100 is enjoyable and soul-lifting, because it's a story about making the most out of your life, which also doubles as a reality check that maybe you don't need an apocalypse to happen to you to take control of your life and do the things you really want. A career change? Maybe a new hairstyle or a spontaneous road trip or touching grass, who knows? Drop what you do to take life by the wheel in the comments down below. Me, personally,
I'm gonna be a one-man cheeseburger apocalypse.